everybody. Welcome. I hope everyone's having a great day so far. Welcome back to the third day of South by Southwest EDU. I've had the pleasure of working with our featured speakers for the past several months, and I'm excited to introduce our next speaker. Named one of 8 eSchool News tech-savvy superintendents and one of the 10 White House Connected Educator Champions of Change in 2013, our next speaker is dedicated to implementing change within our school systems. So without further ado, please help me welcome Dr. Dallas Dance.
So good morning. And we do recognize the fact when we're this close to 6th Street that sometimes the party doesn't stop until 3, 4 in the morning. But to also recognize the fact that South by Southwest EDU has become one of the best educational conferences that we have in our country. And so I would like to commend them and thank them for inviting us back to share some of the information and some of the news and the great work that's happening in Baltimore County Public Schools. But if you're on the East Coast and you have anyone who's from Boston down even to Atlanta, this is what we've been thinking. So coming to Austin and coming to Texas, we're really excited about some of the weather that you've actually brought online for us. But on the East Coast, we are a bit tired of the weather. But in Baltimore County, to give you sort of an idea of our school system, a little information about us. We're right now the 25th largest school system in the country, but we're only the 3rd largest in the state of Maryland. We follow Montgomery County and Prince George's County in terms of our enrollment for the state of Maryland, but we have a very large organization with 173 school centers and programs and almost 19,000 employees. A couple things to know about our school system, though, is that over half of our students are students of color. And almost half of our students are students who qualify for free or reduced lunch. With all of that work going on in our school system, though, we've been very excited that the most important statistic that school systems are rated upon, graduation rate, we've literally gone up almost 4 points in the last 2 years. We boast right now an 87.6% graduation rate. And when we look at our achievement gap between our African-American students and our white students in terms of the graduation rate, there is no gap. There's literally less than a 1% differential between them. But there's work to do because our gap exists among males and females. But when you look at the scholarship dollars, the amount of money that our graduating class of 2014 have really brought into, which really economic opportunities for families, almost $150 million have been garnered by the class of 2014. So we do a lot of things well in Baltimore County Public Schools. I always have to tell my colleagues, you have to make sure that you're noting the great things that are happening in a school system so you can build a case for why other things have to get done. So we have the 2nd highest graduation rate among large school systems in our country. We are literally almost just 1 point behind Fairfax County Public Schools. In addition, more than half of our schools are rated in some of the best 7% in terms of high schools across our country. A phenomenal statistic when you look at the fact that we have 24 comprehensive high schools. We have 17 of our schools who are national Blue Ribbon schools and 21 they're now Maryland Blue Ribbon schools. So again, a lot of great work. And we have multiple excellent awards that many different organizations have rated us. Every year we do a stakeholder satisfaction survey. And so we ask our communities, tell us about the work that we're doing. And so we're excited that when you ask parents, individual parents about their child's school, 91% of the parents will say, my child's school is either highly effective or effective. So again, how do we make sure that we build on that? We have to say good is not good enough. So even though we have the 2nd highest graduation rate among large school systems in the country, 12% of our students are still not graduating on time. So when we start putting a face to that, that's someone's son, that's someone's daughter. But also, we also boast right now that we have the 3rd highest graduation rate for African Americans. So a very good statistic. However, at the same time, 18% of African American students are still not graduating on time. So building the case between that was really saying that in our community, we believe that all means all. And so every single school system has a mantra, they have a vision or mission that says all means all, but we have to ask ourselves, what does it really, really mean for Baltimore County Public Schools? I was very fortunate to follow a superintendent who had been doing this work for 12 years. Dr. Joe Harrison was the superintendent in Baltimore County from 2000 to 2012. And when we look at the statistics of individuals who've been in the superintendency, particularly a large superintendency, the average is about 3 to 4 years. Dr. Harrison had 12 strong years of leadership. We had a blueprint for progress that really built on achievement gaps and making sure that we accelerated the closing of those gaps. So coming in, we said we needed to build on the great work that was happening with Blueprint for Progress. But it couldn't be that the superintendent came in and said, this is going to be my vision. We clearly said this has to be something that's really reaching out to our community. That's a community plan. We had well over 200 community meetings. We met with well over 1,500 individuals and said, what is it that we, as Baltimore County Public Schools, want to see the next generation of learning for our school system look like? Well, I'm excited because out of that came Blueprint 2.0. Again, building on the great work that existed for Blueprint for Progress, but really talked about how do we raise the achievement for all students and close those gaps at a quicker pace. Now, when you talk to our staff will talk about the academics, the safety, the communication, the organizational effectiveness, and there are specific strands to that entire plan that's really, really good work. But when folks talk to me, I talk about our theory of action. We talk about the fact that our goal for our school system is to make sure our kids are globally competitive when they graduate. We believe that in order for kids to be globally competitive, two things must exist. We have to make sure that every single kid has access to an equitable digital learning environment. This means leveling the playing field, making sure that the haves and have-nots no longer exist in our school system. This is making sure that kids, regardless of their zip code, regardless of the area in which, Baltimore County in which they live, every kid has an equal access to an equitable digital learning environment. The other part of that was really, really exciting because as we talk to our business community, as we talk to other folks in our community, they said we want our students to be competitive when they graduate, and that means making sure that every single kid can graduate learning a second and sometimes a third language prior to graduation. Now, most school systems will start that work in middle school. We'll have middle school kids in 6th grade maybe explore different cultures, different languages. 7th and 8th grade might get a little bit more serious. We talked about in Baltimore County, how do we back map that to as early as 4th grade to make sure that our kids will learn a language in elementary and middle school and ultimately go into high school, maybe continuing with that same language or trying out a third language. So we talk about that bold theory of action that everyone says, you guys are crazy for trying to do. But what we see right now is that we're making extreme progress on those goals. What we like to do is go back to data in Baltimore County Public Schools. Again, take, for example, the stakeholder satisfaction survey we do every single year. When we gave this stakeholder satisfaction survey last school year, what was really concerning to me is that when you talk to principals and assistant principals, these are the leaders in all of our 173 school centers and programs, 2/3 of them said that their academic program is meeting the needs of their students. This is the leadership. So again, 2/3 said their program is meeting the academic needs of their students. Well, what about the other third? So that said, we have to take some bold action. So we said, let's look a little deeper in this stat. 67%, again, another 2/3 of the assistant principals and the principals said they have access to instructional technology. Let's look at all the school-based people. 70% said that. So that's not even talking to parents or students. These are our leaders and our school-based employees. So again, what about the other third that we're not necessarily meeting? So for us, this was all about an agenda focused on equity and having a serious conversation where folks understood that equality and equity are two totally different conversations. And that if we want to make sure we level the playing field for all students, particularly students of color and students who are living in poverty, we have to make sure we're giving all students exactly what they need. Not what we think we want them to have, but exactly what they need. But a part of that conversation was really focusing on what does teaching and learning really look like for our school system. Now, our teachers were very passionate about this, and they said to me as superintendent, we have so many things going on. How do you draw it all together for us in one simple element? So if you go into each of our classrooms, you will see our teaching and learning framework posted in every classroom is linked to several different items that we do in terms of the work we do. And there's a lot of information if you go to our website that actually details out the teaching and learning framework. But let's talk a little bit about the teaching and learning framework. Every school system has a goal. The goal is globally competitive graduates. That's our goal, plain and simple. But in order to do that, though, we have to have a conversation. What does the globally competitive curricula look like? So this is totally fundamentally redesigning the course experiences we give to our students. How do we make sure that it's relevant, that it's rigorous, that it's accessible, but for the most part, it's responsive to the needs of kids? This is fundamentally saying to ourselves, Algebra 1 can't look like in 2016 what it looked like in 1998 or 1968. Because if you look at the mathematics courses in the mathematics classrooms, they look exactly the same, but we're expecting a different result. So we have to ask ourselves, our teachers live and breathe by our curricula. What does the globally competitive curriculum look like? So then, we all were going through new teacher evaluations, principal evaluations. How do we draw in what do we expect from the globally competitive teacher? How do we make sure that we link our preparation and planning, our classroom environment? How do we link our instruction, but also our professional environment to make sure our teachers are prepared to teach 21st century students those skills that we know they need? But last but not least, we can't leave students out of the equation. So if you think about the globally competitive student, we start talking about those P21 skills we know we want students to do and know and be able to learn. But at the same time, if you look at the 4 domains of the teaching and learning framework, 95% of school systems in our country only focus on the core knowledge. So we know we want to teach students math, science, English, and history, but what about the relevancy of what they're learning? How do they make sure that they're communicating, they're problem solving, they're collaborating while they're also learning that core content? So that was the element between our teaching and learning framework. But we started with the conversation. What does the classroom, again, look like? School systems all across the country want to just jump to say, you know what do we need to spend in order to do this work? But what does the classroom look like? So we said, you know what, there are 8 things that every single classroom needs if a student's going to be successful. 1, we know they need student voice. We know that they need choice. We need to be able to allow our students the opportunity to pick and choose. In many cases, why should every student have to do the same project? So how about giving them some choice, but also a time for reflection? We expect it of our teachers, but in many cases, we're not expecting that of our students, and to give them opportunities for innovation. Because some of the best work that our teachers do is when they're able to sort of let their guard down and just innovate. How can they be critical thinkers and making sure they're problem solvers to where we give them something, we don't necessarily tell them how to get it done, but we allow them to think and to struggle a bit in our classrooms. They have to have some self-assessment, of course, to figure out whether they've gotten this right the first time or even the second or the third time. But last but not least, there needs to be a connected learning environment for our kids. Now, all that's easier said than done, right? And we know that. But if you think about it, this is all about classrooms being learner-centered. And that was the goal behind what we were trying to do in Baltimore County Public Schools. How do you create environments to where we ask ourselves the critical question, who owns the classroom? Now, if we ask our teachers that, in many cases, our teachers may raise their hand very quickly and say, that's my classroom. That's why when a teacher may have to float, a teacher gets upset. But if we ask a student whose classroom it is, the student will automatically take ownership and say, it's my classroom, or it should say them. If we ask our principals and our assistant principals in our schools, they'll undoubtedly say that it's the student's classroom. But when we go in, again, 98% of our classrooms across the country, who's doing most of the work? Who's working harder? And so now, as we've really focused on what a learner-centered environment looks like for our school system, we're talking about something as simple as, how is the classroom set up? How do we make sure that regardless of where the teacher is in the classroom, there are kids all over the classroom taking ownership in it? So as we start our learner-centered environment classroom focus, let's talk about what it looks like in Baltimore County Public Schools.
One of the major changes occurring as we shift to our digital learning platform is the move toward learner-centered environments. Today we'll take a look inside a learner-centered classroom and see what that means for teachers and students.
Look for me. I am in the grass.
If you're always talking to the teacher, you can't really have a group talk. And you can't really share your ideas and stuff with other people.
Learner-centered environment is really the heart of the transformation for teaching and learning because it takes into account the teacher's role and the way teachers interact with curriculum and with students.
Do you see how asking questions can help your visualizing be a little bit more detailed?
Students are excited because they have a say in what it is they're able to learn. It's all about that independent choice and the students evaluating themselves within that area and what they need to work on.
What I like about it is that we don't have to, that the teacher doesn't have to tell us what to go to every day.
We are really raising learners who know that they have a responsibility when they arrive on the doorstep of the school. And they are responsible to make sure that they've learned. They're evaluating their learning, they're creating rubrics to talk about how much they've learned, to measure their success.
We're thinking, like, why did she wake up her parents in the middle of the night?
We have transitioned to a learner-centered environment which really has empowered our students. It has provided them an opportunity to be who they are, where they are in the classroom. It has removed artificial barriers that we had prior to, where it may have been the teacher's space and we were fitting the children into that. Now it's the student's space and we're facilitating the learning.
We always think of a learner-centered environment as the room that when you walk into it, you can't find the teacher. Because the teacher takes into account everything that students are bringing into the classroom. They use the information, their unique skills, their unique gifts, their talents, their culture. And they take what they know and they create an environment that is responsive to those students.
I like choosing where I like to sit and read because, like, where you like to sit, you can get on a beanbag or on a stool where you can just relax and do some work.
I think the expert in the classroom just gives me a little more freedom as a teacher to work with my small groups and my students who need a scribe or a reader for their accommodations. The expert is there as kind of a step before coming to the teacher.
I like about being an expert that I can help the students so they would know what to do.
I like talking with my classmates because so I can know what they think
And why do they think that?
We can also talk to them and collaborate with them on the kid blog, where we can answer to some of their responses they give about their books and maybe give some suggestions. It'll help them get better at doing things, and it's just a really friendly way to kind of look out for your friends.
Most classrooms have always had a couple computers at least. And unfortunately, the way they've been used in the past is that when you're done your work early, you can go get a computer and you can go onto a program and you can play something. Well, unfortunately, some students are never done early. So now that everyone has a device, they're actually able to use the devices and the technology as an integral part of their learning, as opposed to an add-on that they might not ever get to otherwise.
You can walk into any classroom at any given time and see a blended environment, paper pencil tasks, novels, text, computers. Students are engaged at a variety of different levels.
The technology is cool because we can always check on how our grades are going and how we're doing in class.
Each learner gets what they need and they get the support that they need in the small group that they need.
We want students to take ownership and responsibility and become lifelong learners and determine how they best learn, and this is allowing them to do that.
We're preparing children for a world that we don't really know about yet, and we don't know the jobs that are going to exist, the technologies that are going to exist. So we're creating critical thinkers now. We're creating problem solvers. We're creating opportunities for children to collaborate.
Everything feels different. When we walk into classrooms now, the language of the classroom has changed. The classroom is about the children.
So wow, the language of the classroom changing. So what is the impact for us as school leaders or even as school-based employees as we think about the language of our classroom changing? When we start thinking about, again, these learner-centered environments, a couple of the pictures I'm showing you are pretty unique in that usually when administrators come into classrooms, students immediately pause and look at the administrator, right? When you go into a learner-centered classroom, regardless of who the administrator is, students are so engaged, they're still in their own work. So look at the picture at the bottom. Our Chief Academic Officer, Verlita White, walks into a classroom, students in his or her own learning environment. In this case, the student's Ramon, in his own learning space, his own learning environment, and she gets down with him and is able to continue his learning along with him, right? We had a group of 8 people in that classroom at that moment, and Ramon literally was still in his own world, right? Because it was so personalized to him that he didn't care about the adults in the room. He was taking ownership of his own learning. Well, that's what's the impetus behind S.T.A.T. So again, we start talking about our theory of action, making sure that equitable learning environments that are digital in nature are in fact in every single school, regardless of where the kids are living. This was what we talked about with S.T.A.T. Now the kind of interesting part about it is that students branded S.T.A.T. for us. They branded it as students and teachers accessing tomorrow because in their mind, it needed to be urgent, but it needed to be something to where we recognized that their future was the brand behind it. But what we did was kind of different from what other school systems across our country might have done. We started completely with our curriculum first. So for us, this was not about a device at all. We spent well over 18 months planning for this work, and I'm going to talk to you a little about that. But for us, we said, what do we want students to know and be able to do? This makes professional development for teachers easier. It makes communication to our community easier because we've really made the case for why our students need to be able to do this. So we talked about, with us transitioning to new state standards, how do we start at the elementary level and rebrand our entire K-5 curricula from a digital platform? We talked about tying in that teaching and learning framework to make sure there was an instructional delivery that every single teacher knew that we could actually hone in on their unique skills in the classroom. But we also recognized the fact that when we were going to move one-to-one, there needed to be conversions that we actually moved forward with as well. So we have 8 conversions when we start looking at S.T.A.T. We knew we wanted our curriculum to look different, right? What is it that our students need to know and be able to do in our classrooms? The instructional conversion is how do we want teachers to actually teach that, right? What do we want the classroom to really look like through an instructional conversion? The assessment conversion, which we're going to talk about a little bit later with our work through BCPS 1 with our partnership with Ingrate, but this is getting away from our paper pencil tests. It's getting away from multiple choice to where we really can have assessments that are in fact 9 weeks long projects for kids to where they have to work on collaboration, critical thinking skills. But also, as they have assessments, kids need to have real-time results in terms of what those assessment results look like, and then teachers can tailor the intervention for students appropriately. There was an organizational development conversion. So we meet with our principals every single month. All 173 principals get together once a month. I'm there along with them. We talk about different things going on. They get their professional development. Teachers get their professional development as well through the use of a STAT teacher. And a STAT teacher is a full-time professional development teacher in every single school to help us leverage STAT. But also, we knew that it couldn't just be principals and teachers getting this training. Our Board of Education got their own training as well, too, where they went from a paper system to board docs. And our Board of Education embraced it because they recognized the fact that they needed to be responsible role models if we wanted this to look and change in the classroom as well, too. We also had conversation about what does it look like on the business services side of the house. For a school bus driver, for a food nutrition service worker, when we go to a one-to-one environment, how does that change, in fact, what they do in their work as well, too? So we knew that we couldn't just focus on one level of the organization. It needed to be a complete shift for all 19,000 employees. There was an infrastructure conversion. So you'll always hear the stat that in Baltimore County Public Schools, 83% of our schools are more than 40 years or older. That's a completely true stat. But what it also was the fact that it only would cost us $12 million for all of our schools to be wireless. That was an investment that we hadn't made in the past. That at the end of this school year, all 173 school centers and programs will have a complete Wi-Fi interface. So we recognized the fact that if the infrastructure was going to support this work, it had to work when folks wanted to turn it on. There was also a policy conversion. How do we make sure that we keep our kids safe, we keep our employees safe, regardless of the infrastructure we're trying to set for them? When I did this work in Henrico County Public Schools under the leadership of Mark Edwards, I was a teacher and a principal then. We recognized the fact that while we had to keep our kids safe, we also had to keep our employees safe at the same time, because our employees would have 24/7 access to their devices as well. So in looking at the policy conversion, we looked at the acceptable use policy, but really changing that to a responsible use policy. So that you're not telling kids, do not, do not, do not, but you're actually teaching them how to responsibly use this new tool. But not just the acceptable use or the responsible use policy. We also looked at our grading policy, our promotion, our retention policy. Because if we're going to really approach this from an equity playing field, we have to make sure that we answer the questions, are our grades fair? Are our promotion retention policy fair for all kids? That's all a part of the policy conversion that we're working through. We knew this was a budget conversion that we had to go live with. So we recognized the fact that this is going to cost a little bit more money, but at the same time, we have a $1.6 billion budget right now when you look at our capital and our operating. How are we currently leveraging those funds right now? So when we got on board in Baltimore County Public Schools, every single school was buying its own copier, its own printer. They were basically paying different prices. They may have been using the same vendor, but one vendor might have been charging $2 per kit. The same vendor was charging another school $4 per kit. So we said, let's look at how we can actually leverage the buying power, look at the procurement process that we have in place, the regulations, and really leverage the buying power of Baltimore County Public Schools. But we also were upfront that there are certain things that we just can't do anymore. So if it was not in Blueprint 2.0, we had to make some tough decisions. And so we really put a lot of emphasis into program evaluation, looking at our accountability and research department to say, you know what, how can we look at the academic return on investment of every single thing we're doing? So just because we've been using a program for 10 years, does it mean we have to use it for an 11th year? Or are we getting academic results that benefit kids? And if we're not getting the results, we have to make critical decisions around whether we continue doing that work or not. But last but not least, and this is huge, and this is why we have our Chief Communications Officer, Michael Dixon, here with us today. Anytime we throw a name to something in education, people throw darts. And so we knew that even though students branded it as ST.A.T, the moment the name went out there, folks were going to say, I learned from textbooks, why can't they? And so we said, how do we become ambassadors, not just as central office staff and IT and academic folks? How do we leverage our students as ambassadors? We leverage our parents as ambassadors, but also our community, so that everyone gets talking points around what ST.A.T is versus what it isn't. So with this, we said we need to have a timeline for how this work should happen. We knew that to do this work, we had to start slow to go fast. And so again, when we started planning this work in 12-13, this was all planning. When we started moving into 13-14, as you can see from the visual, we started with a lot of professional development, a lot of curriculum design. We knew that we had to give our teachers their devices so they knew exactly what we were going to be expecting from kids because they've had the devices first as well. But I'm going to tell you, we knew that we had to have rubber meet the road for the 14-15 school year, which is what we're in right now. But again, we wanted to start slow. So we wanted to start with our Lighthouse schools. So Lighthouse schools are 10 elementary schools in Baltimore County Public Schools who are implementing ST.A.T for the first year. These are 10 elementary laboratory schools that schools from all over the county can come see ST.A.T in action. I'm going to give you sort of a mid-year update in terms of where we are with ST.A.T. But the interesting part about this work is that we're always asked, why didn't you start in high school? We recognize the fact that many folks start in high school, and again, we were in Henrico, we started in high school as well, because the notion is that high school students can deal with the devices better than elementary kids. Plus, we knew that there are fewer high school units we'd have to buy than elementary. At the same time, when you're looking at a complete culture shift, though, we wanted elementary kids to push the school system forward as well, too. We knew that we wanted to make sure that they had a foundation to where, again, if we're thinking responsible use of building a positive digital footprint, elementary kids need to have that work done first to push the transformation we wanted in middle school and ultimately push the transformation we wanted in high school. Let's talk about where we are with our Lighthouse Schools.
We're halfway through our inaugural year of ST.A.T, or Students and Teachers Accessing Tomorrow. Let's take a look inside some classrooms and talk to students, teachers, and administrators about how the year's gone so far.
1, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Huge differences in teaching and learning from our beginning to now. We knew the teachers would be stepping more to the side. We knew they'd be working more as facilitators. I think what we didn't expect was the incredible collaboration. Our kids have become people in the classroom who can be very important, even more important to the teaching aspect.
I can see other people's ideas and what they're thinking about, and then we can see, like, maybe we can join it together and see what we'll get.
Just the excitement that came into the building the first day of school, just knowing that we had power literally in our hands. The kids were going to access the world that we've been talking about and we've been giving them access to, but now that they have the devices, they just, that power, that ownership.
Being a classroom teacher in previous years here and just being able to walk in classrooms, get outside my classroom bubble that I used to be in and seeing the work done by the teachers and students has been very, very pleasing.
Boys and girls are beginning to take much more ownership and responsibility for their learning. They're taking ownership and responsibility for their classroom. Teachers are beginning to understand that they need to allow their students to have productive struggle and learn through exploration and things like that.
The computers help me a lot. Instead of asking my teacher all the questions, I can just look it up on the computer.
What does inform mean? What do you think of when I say inform?
I think the biggest shift I've seen is the student or the teachers planning and how they're trying to think about student choice and how they're trying to think about their environment and how they need to think differently. We're kind of only at the tip of it right now. I think we're still learning and we're still trying to figure out where we want to go from here, but I really see this technology beginning to truly transform what teaching and learning looks like.
The equity issues when it comes to many equity issues for children, one of which is, all children having access to an education throughout the day that really meets their needs. I think that for technology can be that bridge for some children from where they start to where they need to be.
When I walk into a Halstead classroom, it's kind of a magical experience because it is very loud, but in a really productive way. So students are talking to each other, they're asking questions of each other, and they have a lot of wonderings, which is amazing. You actually don't know where the teacher is because she's so engaged in small group instruction.
It's turned from just the teacher being in the classroom, teaching children, to learning from the children and facilitating the learning.
Instead of working with a partner, it's like, I sometimes imagine that my computer's my partner.
When I look back and I look at some of the artifacts and the evidence and seeing the story unfold, what I'm seeing is, and what's kind of resounding, is the passion that's coming out of everyone about this. And it's not just the teacher's passion. I mean, the teachers, I think this has revitalized their passion for teaching, but also the students' passion. I mean, they walk out and they're like, this is awesome, they're just so excited about everything that they do every day. And the impact it's had on the entire school culture is really amazing.
So you heard Jennifer in the video talk about productive struggle for kids. And that's something that's new. Even though we talk about the fact that we want kids to struggle, in many teachers' minds, they don't want their kids to struggle because they feel like they're not doing their job. In terms of when we're going to a learner-centered environment, though, our teachers recognize the fact that that's part of the learning process. And they also recognize the fact that they're working smarter in their work. They're working harder still, but they're working smarter. They're reaching more students and they're actually accomplishing more goals. So the interesting part about our Lighthouse schools is that we have Title I schools and non-Title I schools. But when you go to them, you won't be able to tell the difference at all. You'll see students literally still personally engaged in their own learning experience. And you will see teachers working with small groups all the time, whether it's math, whether it's science, whether it's history, or whether it's English language arts. But in many cases, what you'll see is English language arts and history being integrated into one. What we also like, though, is that in most school systems, we'll have a 1 hour and 20, or I should say a 2-hour reading block. But in many cases, with our Lighthouse schools, there is no reading block. Reading occurs throughout the entire day. So if Ramon has finished his assignment early, why can't Ramon go back and work on something else to accelerate his own learning? Because teachers have been able to work through that with him. So now, for the fall of 2015, what do we have planned? Because we recognize the fact that with 173 school centers and programs, we can't focus on just 10 schools. So we're scaling this up next year. But again, starting slow to go fast. Those 10 elementary Lighthouse schools, next year, they'll be grades K-5. We also are bringing on all of our other elementary schools in grades 1, 2, and 3 only. The other interesting part about this work is that we want to create laboratory middle schools, and ultimately, during the 16-17 school year, laboratory high schools. But in order to do that work, you have to have middle school Lighthouse schools. So we're going to have 7 middle school Lighthouse schools next year. They're not grades 6 through 8, only in 6th grade. So really focusing on, we recognize that kids getting off track between the 5th and the 6th grade year. So how do we leverage a personalized environment by giving kids access to a digital tool to really make sure there's a smooth transition from 5th to 6th grade? Ultimately, you can see where this plan is going. We actually have high school Lighthouse schools, and ultimately the Lighthouse middle schools going 6 through 8. But again, school systems who really want to do it well have to start slow in order to go fast. And that was the basis behind the fall of 2015. But one of the unique elements around ST.A.T, which I really like, is this whole concept around BCPS 1. Again, very fortunate, you heard me mention earlier around our partnership with Zach Posner, who's the CEO of Ngrade. When I got to Baltimore County, we had literally 7 systems that we were using. We had our student information system in one platform. We had our learning management system in another platform. There was something they called an instructional management system in another platform. Our data dashboard was somewhere else. Our data warehouse was somewhere else. And one of the things that was resounding in all of our community meetings with teachers and in parents is we want one system. Now, you might have other things that work in the background to make that one system work, but to us, we want one single sign-on system where we all can throw all of our information into one. So we started looking at this. We actually pulled together a group of about 80 people within our school system. We said, what are the essential functions you need in order to do your job? So teachers were on there, principals were on there, students were on there, parents were on there. And so if you look at the concept behind BCPS 1, everything from our grade book to our content management system to our employee effectiveness, our professional development will be in there, student information, but ultimately student assessment, all is being integrated into one system. Now, of course, when you're doing that, that's another one you have to start slow in order to go fast. We all know that the student information system is the heart and soul of any school system. So in order to do this work, we knew we needed to start slow, and that's why we started with our grade book this year. So if you think about the fact that our students right now have access to BCPS 1, this is the homepage. Not just our students, but again, our parents, our teachers, our administrators, they go there, they see this homepage. But then they'll be able to see their entire class and their current grade. So every single student, even our first, second graders. And so kind of the unique part when you go to our Lighthouse schools, and I pick on Ramon because I love him to death. Ramon literally will go every single morning and go to his BCPS 1 log in, and his teacher will have been already able to assign him assignments for the day. He may have already been able to see his grades. If things have actually been due, he'll be able to see that. But every single kid, grades K-12 right now in Baltimore County, will be able to see the list of their classes and their current grades because we started with the grade book. The interesting part about this, too, is that we always talk about having our kids organized. We want them to stay on task. So why not have a student calendar where they'll be able to see what's due now, what's due in a week, what's due in a month. They'll be able to organize themselves critically around what do they have to do to stay on task. And they also are able to see the list of their classes at the top as well, too. Through our partnership with Discovery Education, we recognize the fact that we wanted quality digital content. We recognized the fact that if we really wanted to make ST.A.T successful, teachers had to have access to digital content. And it couldn't be so much that they had to really think about what do I really do, but it was in one place to where they can say, we want real-world events. So take, for example, the situation we had just last week where we were talking about why is the Prime Minister from Israel addressing a joint session of Congress? High school students thought that only the president can call a joint session of Congress. That's real-time information right there that we were able to get at our fingertips because of quality digital content such as providers with Discovery Education. But also, if you take for other quality content information that we have, NBC Learn K-12, where students, again, get real-time information to not just history or English classes, but even math, science, and even in the arts as well, too. So one thing that BCPS 1 is truly rich in is digital content to make sure that teachers can leverage personalizing that experience for young people. Even our providers with BrainPop and making sure that, again, those resources that we want to have in order for kids to be able to leverage enrichment and advancement opportunities or even remediation opportunities all integrated into BCPS 1. Our teachers and their assessments can actually integrate those now into BCPS 1 to where if it's a curricular office that wants the assessment there or if a teacher wants to compose his or her own assessment, it's right there in BCPS 1. It can be multiple choice if they want it. It can actually be fill in the blank if they want it or open-ended response. Or if our students wanted to collaborate with each other, that's an opportunity as well for them to do that. The good thing, though, is that as soon as the assessment results are there, it links directly to the teacher gradebook. Not only does it link directly to the teacher gradebook, it links directly to the student's calendar so they see what their grades are. Oh yeah, and for our parents, they automatically in real time will be able to see their child's grades as well too. Actually leveling the playing field in terms of communication between students and teachers. But what I really, really like, and I think the power of what we're doing with BCPS 1, we talk about personalizing and differentiating instruction for kids. You can't do that without leveraging technology. I always tell people, if I can go back to the classroom now, I think I'd be the world's best teacher. And I think I was a good teacher if you ask some of my students, and some who are here at South by Southwest. But one of the things that we could not do in the classroom of 30 is truly personalize that experience for every single kid. Well, now with BCPS 1, you can. Because a teacher will have his or her roster, and if there are 28 or 30 kids on that roster, that teacher can pick and choose what assignments students get. So take, for example, Ramon again. Ramon is in a 3rd grade class, but is operating on a 5th grade level with math. In his BCPS 1 calendar, he gets opportunity and access to 5th grade math material. When his teacher pulls her small group for math, she's doing small group around 4th and 5th grade math for that group because they're an accelerated group. So not necessarily labeling a kid saying they're GT because that's just exactly what we might want to do at that moment, but really personalizing and customizing the experience of that young person to where we're giving him exactly what he needs at that moment. This is about us as a school system moving our mindset from a proficiency mindset to a growth mindset. So if a student comes into a 3rd grade classroom and they leave on a 3rd grade classroom, absolutely that student has proficiency. However, that student has no growth. And every single parent in our country deserves their child to have at least 1 year of academic growth for every year they're in our classrooms. BCPS 1 allows us to do that because, again, based on those assessment results or based on just formative assessments that teachers give students every single day, that teacher then can customize and personalize that learning experience for students. So our rationale for why we're doing this work is pretty simple. We recognize the fact that we want all of our students to be globally prepared when they graduate because they're not going to be competing against kids from Baltimore County when they graduate. They're not going to be competing against kids from Montgomery County when they graduate. They may be competing against some students from the state of Texas, but for the most part, internationally is where our students will be competing against our students, or competing against their colleagues. And so having access to where they're responsibly learning how to use technology, to where we personalize it for them, but also giving them an opportunity to learn a second language prior to them graduating. The most recent stat talked about that if our students in 2020 can master English, Spanish, and Mandarin Chinese, they'll be able to participate in 90% of the world's economy. So if that's the case, we have to begin to tell the story about how we personalize instruction. So through our partnership with Intel and Daily, we've been able to put together a little snippet to talk about how we're going to tell that story.
Well, now we have our own devices. My mom thinks it's pretty cool because you can use your fingers on the touch screen. And my dad thinks it's pretty cool you can turn your computer into a tablet. It changed school. It changed school because instead of using normal devices, we have this like pretty extraordinary devices. Plus they're hard to bring. You can go on different websites. I know. So cool.
The first thing is engagement. I mean, there's actively involved. Their light bulbs are going off.
If you're the first person to get the answer and get it right, you get it right, see? Right, and I just have 19, now I have 29.58.
My students are more independent and more responsible than ever before. This is something really brand new.
Office referrals are down, behavior issues are down, kids can't wait to get to school, to find a space where they can be the most productive.
The first time I heard about it was last school year, and the kids came back and announced that Rogers Forge got selected to be a Lighthouse School, which meant we were going to be piloting this program.
When they told us about it, I thought it was a good idea.
I was really excited because they're giving them more opportunity to have the experience with computers and different devices.
This first year, which is the 2014-15 school year, we started with our 10 Lighthouse schools. And these are 10 schools who are laboratory schools at the elementary level where we're starting our digital transformation known as S.T.A.T.
The critical elements in the S.T.A.T. program really have to do with a student-centered, learner-centered environment.
Once you've got the student-centered learning in place and the culture where students have choice and students are more active in their learning, when we got the devices, it took it to a whole nother level in that Students started taking ownership in their own learning.
What we have now are students that are so highly engaged, but they have such ownership for their own learning because it is personalized to them. We're seeing self-confidence in students that we hadn't seen in years.
We're seeing students taking more ownership of the classroom.
Then recently we've been doing research on wild weather, so we're looking at discovery boards and watching videos, reading, and they're just working with one another, collaborating. I mean, they run around the tables, watch this, go around the other side, watch this. They're helping each other, they're building a sense of community with each other.
It's about ensuring globally competitive graduates, and that means that we need to make sure the teaching that we do in our classrooms, the experience our students have on a daily basis, is personalized and customized to meet their individual needs. We believe that in order to do that, there's no other way than to put a tool in their hands on a daily basis.
What we've also seen is that we really have leveled the playing field. So when we go to some of the other schools around that are also Lighthouse schools, we're noticing that it's very comparable, and even though our boys and girls come from very different backgrounds, what they're receiving in the classroom is very similar. So it really supports the whole initiative of what ST.A.T really started as far as providing students with access and opportunity.
It is so exciting to be a part of what's happening with the ST.A.T initiative, with the devices, with the student-centered learning environment.
Recently, one of my students, he ran out of the room when his parents came to pick him up, and he just screamed, "It's the best day ever. We did so much things with our device."
It teaches him about the computer and also teaches me, because I really don't know anything about computers. So I'm learning through him.
They're wanting to come in every day, like ready to learn. They're excited about school, they're excited about learning.
You don't have to wait and sign up for the computer lab anymore. You can just go to the cart and grab your computer.
School is way different. Way different. It's pretty good. Like it's like making us smarter, but in a better way.
So again, and just thinking about the communications conversion, and again, thank you to our partners at Intel and Daily for that, because we would not be able to do this without our service providers. But we recognize the fact, too, that we have to constantly get the message out there, and we have to constantly allow students to tell that message as well, too. In terms of the professional development, I have to say, our principals are phenomenal. We've had principals who really have embraced this, where I've had principals who come up to me and say, you know what, I was going to retire, but I'm going to wait about 5 years. And I'm like, great. So one of the things we recognize, too, is that with principals, we have to make sure that the support is there in order to be able to do this heavy lift as well. And that's why the professional development teacher that we call the ST.A.T teacher is so critical. The training that that individual gets so that he or she can take it back to their classrooms is phenomenal. So we've been able to leverage the partnership with Discovery Education to make sure that our ST.A.T teachers and our coaches are trained so that they can provide that additional support to teachers as they go into next year. Now, we recognize the fact that next year is going to be a heavy lift. Right? We're going to bring on 100 elementary schools in grades 1, 2, and 3. But we believe the infrastructure is there because the professional development that we've focused on this year has all been about learner-centered environments. You recognize that I didn't talk about the device at all. Ultimately, we did decide to go with the HP Revolve. But the device to me is not important at all. It's all about what we want students to be able to access through the device, the type of learning that you want students to do with the device, and at the same time, we're going to be impacting communities at the same time. You heard about the parent who talked about the fact that he doesn't know much about computers, but he's learning along with his child. So the role of public education in our country is not just to reach kids, it's to reach families and communities as well, too. But our ultimate goal is simple. We want learner-centered environments to where if you walk into a classroom, you might see this. You might see devices being used, but you also will walk into an environment where learners are really focused all throughout the classroom, and the device is just something that's an add-on that we're doing. But we recognize that you can't customize that experience for kids without that device. So the whole role is how do we develop learners so that it's lifelong for them. And so with that, we can't produce the learning. We have to actually develop learners in them. But to do that requires leadership. And so that's why I'm really excited about the work that our students did in terms of branding of ST.A.T, because it talked about that sense of urgency. And recognizing the fact that if our students, when they graduate for the class of 2015, they're going to have 35 jobs. How do we make sure that we don't focus on core content knowledge as much as focusing on the P21 skills that we want them to do through the core content knowledge? And that's what we're doing in Baltimore County Public Schools. So I really do appreciate the organizers and the producers of South by Southwest EDU for organizing a great conference and giving us an opportunity to share our story. But we also wanted to hold back about 15 minutes for questions if anyone had any. So thank you for allowing us to tell that story. Michael.
Hi, thank you so much for presenting. I thought you were a dynamic presenter, and I really appreciate the information you shared. I have two quick questions. One, is that a grant-funded initiative?
No, it is not.
Where are you getting the money?
Okay, so two quick things. When we started this work around this, we knew that 3 of our schools were actually being funded by a Maryland Innovation Grant for 3 years. And that was really an $800,000 grant. So I don't want you to think that was a lot of money. But what we started doing was really focusing on the professional development for those 3 schools because they were 3 Title I schools as well. But what we kept saying to ourselves is what's most important for us as a school system? And if we really wanted to believe in this plan, then we need to go line by line of our budget. So kind of one of the unique parts about me being a superintendent, I know my budget probably better than my budget people. I know line by line where we're spending the money, and I knew exactly what we had to cut. First year, it was about $13 million to do this for year 1. We only asked the county for $2 million. So we were able to leverage $11 million in savings in year 1, but we recognized the fact that year 2 was going to be about $26 million. We're only asking the county for $13 million of that. So we've been able to leverage the partnership that we have with the county to say if you can support us for 4 years, we can sustain this on our own. So right now we give our schools a per pupil allocation for technology or for other supplies and all that. Well, if we're leveraging the buying power of our school system, you no longer need to purchase technology for your school. We're going to do it for you. So you can then focus on really the essential instructional materials that you need. But at the end of the day, we're looking at about $50 million of new money that we will use in order to do this. And so we've been very, very upfront with our local and our state officials. So unlike many school systems in the country, we have no taxing authority. It's all about me convincing our local and state elected officials to fund it. The way we're doing is by telling the story of why we have to go this route and building that sense of urgency.
Interesting. Okay, second question. Are there any conversations about conducting longitudinal studies with the students that graduate going through this program and whether or not they did achieve those globally competitive positions you're preparing them for?
Absolutely. Now you're talking our language. So a part of the work that we're doing right now is evaluating what we're doing with Johns Hopkins University. So Johns Hopkins has really a unique algorithm right now where they're really trying to figure out if we're measuring and actually accomplishing those 21st century goals. They're actually going to be releasing their mid-year report to our Board of Education next Tuesday. But we've been talking about how do we leverage this partnership all the way through for the next 8 to 10 years to make sure we're accomplishing that goal.
So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I'm actually from Baltimore City, and we talk a lot about what you guys are doing. I think it's really interesting. And one thing I've been wondering about for a while is I know you're really big on foreign languages and obviously technology, and how are those two things going to work together?
Absolutely. So, and one of the things, and I actually had a conversation with Dr. Thornton just last night, we do a lot of partnership with Baltimore City and Baltimore County, where we are a horseshoe around the city, but we have roughly 200,000 students in the entire Baltimore region. For us, we really wanted to focus on one language to make sure that we can sustain it for elementary and middle school. So we're doing Spanish language instruction at 4th and 5th grade. So our goal was how do we teach Spanish 1 over the course of 4th and 5th grade, but we're leveraging technology and human capital to do that. So we actually have a full-time foreign language teacher that actually works with 2 to 3 schools at a time. That individual goes to schools once, twice a week, and we leverage technology for the remaining parts of the week to give the kids the instructional rounds around that. We also, though, are leveraging the fact that we want parents to have access to that as well, too. So we're going to be starting next year to where parents will have their own username and login to continue at home and learning with their kids as well, too. But our thinking was if we can teach Spanish instruction over the course of 4th through 8th grade, kids can go into high school taking Spanish 4 or Spanish 5, or they can take another language if they in fact want to. But that's the way we're leveraging and basically marrying technology along with world language acquisition.
That's awesome, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I love your message, start slow to go fast. That's wonderful. How is this translating into other areas such as physical education? That's my realm.
Very good point. So we've been talking a lot now with our health and PE teachers around Fitbits, but also having students to be able to track their fitness goals on their device as well too, where we will then be able to, over the course of the next year or so, be able to link that to BCPS 1-2, so we'll have a full picture of a student. So we've been talking about, you know, in the absence of the state having a longitudinal data system that they can put up and run right now, we'll have something as a school system, though, where we can have a complete picture of a kid from pre-K to 12 that not just looks at their academic, but also the social and emotional well-being of our kids, too, as well as monitoring their health.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would love to know how you were able to put all of your systems together under one umbrella with one login. So did you hire someone to do your own programming and to create this? Or do you have some wonderful site you could tell us about, or management system?
Well, there's a pretty cool guy to your left, Zach Posner, who's the CEO of Ingrate, who's working with us. And I'll tell you what we did. We threw together, again, a bunch of people in the room and said, what are the essential functions we need? The RFP was roughly 78 pages because everyone wanted everything thrown in there. And we recognized the fact that one vendor was not going to be able to do this. So we said we want people to play well in the sandbox with each other, and to the end user, it should look like one, in fact, system. What we had traditionally done in the past is we would develop and build our own systems. And then because of the updates, we were not keeping up with what we need to do in terms of the changing of time. But when we got through the RFP process, InGrade is the platform for it, and then we have Infinite Campus, which is our student information system. Those two systems work in conjunction to create BCPS 1. So in the background, InGrade and Infinite Campus are running, but to the end user, they only see, again, BCPS 1. But we were really, I was very, very fortunate to have Zach Posner, and I give him a couple kudos because he's a graduate of Pikesville High School, which is in Baltimore County Public Schools, and he was really dedicated to making this successful, such in fact that he moved from the West Coast to the East Coast with all the weather to make it such a success. But again, our teachers were very clear. They wanted to go slow with it. And so the gradebook was something that high school teachers had been doing for years. Elementary teachers had never done an online gradebook. So we knew if we got that part right, then they would actually have faith and confidence to allow us to continue building elements into the system. But it should be fully developed the 17-18 school year.
I've got one more question.
Oh, no problem.
On the online technology or curriculum that you're using, you talked about discovery learning, and I saw your social studies textbook. Are you using their math or science textbook?
We're having conversations right now around math. Matter of fact, our Lighthouse middle schools will start in 6th grade math, working with that next year. Our science office is looking at the science textbook as well, too. One of the things, and I really like this about many of the service providers at South by Southwest, and I said this on the radio yesterday, is that they're really listening to the needs of school systems. So as opposed to PDFing a device, a textbook and saying that it's now a tech book, they've really made it more interactive for students. But we also have our own in-house folks who actually write curricula as well. We've been able to leverage digital content and resources to supplement some of the work they're doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your presentation. My world is curriculum. So can you tell me how you went about switching from old school curriculum to new school curriculum? And then I'm going to sit so I can take notes.
Well, I can't tell you it's not hard work. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in there, and Maryland was in the place where we were actually transitioned to new state standards, and some of them call them Common Core. Every state now has a new name for them. So with that, it was a complete rewrite, which allowed us then to say, with higher order thinking questions in terms of standards, how do we make sure that our kids have a unique learning experience? We were really able to do this around English language arts and math first, but our math department was literally a heavier lift than the English language arts department. So we have many folks in our math department that were traditional mathematicians. They were high school in their thinking, and they thought about teaching the content, not necessarily teaching the kids. And so what we've been able to do, and this is a good example too, where we've leveraged partnerships with digital content providers such as Discovery to say, how do we make it, again, an interactive experience for kids? And so what we've been able to do is that even through English language arts, the performance-based assessments that kids are taking are now interdisciplinary. So they're not taking separate ones in history than they are from English language arts. They're combined into one. What we have going on also is that two of the girls who are in one of the pictures that I showed, their 9 weeks assessment is a group project that the two of them have to work on over the course of the whole 9 weeks. That's an English language arts PBA that they have to do. And it's also integrating history at the same time. So what I had to do to our curriculum folks, and this was me working along with Verlita White, is asking our folks the critical question. If we want students to be successful, how must we fundamentally redesign the course experience for them? And what are the experiences that kids need to have in all of our courses in order for them to have those P21 skills we want them to do? So this was a conversation where I, in a meeting, said, and I'm an English major, I said, so why is it that students have to read Shakespeare before they graduate? And to an English, and I was an English major again, that was like, oh, he said that. But we started thinking about what are the P21 skills that you want kids to get through and learn through the reading of a Shakespearean play. Not saying we're getting rid of Shakespeare, because we're not, but how do we make sure that we fundamentally reach those standards with kids? So there was a lot of conversation. English language arts was the first lift that we did. Again, elementary, because the change in new standards was a good one, but then we branched it up into to math, to middle school and high school. Now the other lift is going into middle and high school math, because I'm seeing a lot of change in elementary math. I'm not quite there where I want to be in middle school and high school just yet.
Hello, I want to thank you for such an exciting story and for the leadership and hard work it takes to pull off something like this, but really exciting story. I wanted to ask about the uses of technology in the classroom by students. Do they have opportunities to make, to create, to design? It sounds like there are all sorts of opportunities for students, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So one of the things, and we mentioned this on the slide where we talked about the 8 things that have to exist in today's classroom, is this whole idea around choice. So if a teacher wants to teach, prime example, I think I was in a third grade classroom last week, and they were literally talking about cause and effect. So the teacher basically told students, I want you to come up with a play where you design the play. You're going to incorporate some digital media and some digital tools in it. But we want you to design a play to where you talk about the cause and effect. And you have to be able to teach that to at least 5 of your colleagues. So then you talk about the creative bulb going off in kids' heads. So again, many kids will go immediately to the device. You had some kids who went over in a corner and basically just started thinking through with their partner of what was going to be the plot of the play. And this, again, was at third grade. So in terms of choice, we've really opened it up to saying a part of learner-centered environments is allowing yourself to say, this is the standard, and these are the parameters I want students to be able to operate from within the learning of that standard. And it's allowed for student choice. Again, I'm seeing that a lot in English language arts. I'm seeing it a lot in history. I'm not there where I want to see it in math. So next year, I'm hoping to be able to tell South by Southwest how we've actually fundamentally shifted our mathematics thinking.
Hello, thank you. This has been a very exciting talk. I was curious, when you talk about 21st century workplace skills and collaboration, there are so many direct ties with social emotional learning, and I'm wondering how you're addressing that. Are you doing explicit work around that, and how you're bringing technology and innovation to that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we actually have done a really good job, again, in English language arts that we're branching up, is really how do you embed the life skills that you want students to learn throughout your entire curriculum. So one of the things that teachers told us very early on, and many of us who were teachers know this, it can't be another add-on. It can't be the fact that for 20 minutes we're actually going to be integrating this character education into our curriculum or this social emotional curriculum into our curriculum. How do we embed it so that in the development or reading of a novel or of nonfiction, we actually have opportunities for students to learn what does it mean to be social and emotional healthy? Right? And then how do we, through the leveraging of our student support personnel workers, whether it's social workers, psychologists, counselors in our school, how do we then make sure that we embrace not just the student, but the family as well, too? But we've seen a lot of work around English language arts, which is available online, and I'll make sure you guys get this as well, where we've embedded character education, social and emotional learning all throughout the curricula, and then again, the device is how kids get access to it. Yes, ma'am.
I also just want to ditto what everyone said. This has been my favorite thing so far in this
oh, thank you. That's humbling.
Event, so thank you very much. 2 questions. The first is we are a fairly large district, not as large as you, in the middle of a technology plan, so that early 18-month planning part. How do we connect our group with your group?
Let's talk right after. Okay. One of the things that we do really, really well in education is beg, borrow, and steal from each other. I said that to a group of UT undergraduate students yesterday, and that's what makes us so successful, and all the school improvement and district improvement has really worked. We're just not telling our story of how well it is working. But one of the things that we do in our county is we actually facilitate groups when they come in, they want to talk to us, and not only are we sharing our story, we're also learning from them about how we can make it even better.
Fabulous.
So we can talk right after, and we'll make sure we connect you with a visit.
The second part is one of the things we keep running against is back to the budget, the sustainability of a one-to-one device. With the constant, upgrades, and you've talked about some partnerships. Is that where your money is coming or is going towards? Is it to the devices, or have you planned in the rolling every 3 to 5 years we need new things?
Absolutely. So one of the things when you look at the cost of it, it's going to be the device, right? But I think one of the things that we're getting to a point is where with procurement going the route it's going, we're able to actually assist each other a lot better. So I think companies have really said to themselves, if we really want more and more schools to play in this space, we've got to make a device that actually is cost reasonable for folks to where they still can accomplish what they want. So in Baltimore County Public Schools, if you look at the device we use, it's a little bit more expensive device because that met the needs of what we have. There are school systems who are using Chromebooks, they're using iPads, they're using a various number of devices, and that's a decision they have to make. But I think what you see with companies now is they actually have prices who are coming down because more and more schools are going to it. What we decided to do in Baltimore County is we do a lease option, though. So every 4 years, there's a lease refresh cycle. One of the things that we recognized very early on in the school system I used to work in is that when you purchase devices, and you purchase 50,000 devices, at some point, you're going to have to get rid of 50,000 devices. And what do you do with 50,000 devices? And so what we wanted to do is always make sure that we were keeping up with what the technology we're calling for at that time. So it's a 4-year refresh cycle that every 4 years, our teachers and our students will get new units.
Hello, my name is Monique Zijp. I'm from the Netherlands, and I've listened with a lot of excitement to your story. And one of the things that we are dealing with, that you're dealing with too, apparently, is teachers that have to be developed. And so I would like to hear some more detail on the training that your teachers get, because you say we take our time, but how is that time filled? What do you do in the time?
Good point. So one of the things I think that teachers will always tell you is they want time. Right? So we've been able to look at our school calendar and figure out how do we build more professional development days in the calendar. Now we do a really good job of this when you start looking at September up until January. Of course, when you start missing days for snow, we have to potentially look at some days in terms of makeup. But we actually have time built into our calendar every single month for teachers to get FaceTime with each other. But really what we've seen really leverage it is the ST.A.T teacher. So the ST.A.T teacher is not an evaluator, they're not an administrator. They really work with the teacher on developing learner-centered lesson plans. And then we leverage technology where appropriate with those plans. But the staff development teacher truly is a colleague with those individuals. They go in and co-teach with the individuals. They may have brown bag lunches with those individuals. They really figure out what they can do to support. But also what we notice we need to do is that we need to train our ST.A.T teachers. And so we've been able to work with not just our internal folks with curriculum and instruction, but again, we've been able to work with Discovery Education to say, in going to a digital environment, how do the ST.A.T teachers need to be trained so they can train their other colleagues as well too? When you have a system the size of ours, we can't bring teachers together for professional development. We focused and missed that boat. We were in Houston. We were trying to bring so many teachers together. And so the only way to leverage that is to put teachers in schools who can work with their colleagues. The other thing we're doing too, and we've realized that in Baltimore County Public Schools, we're faced with the fact that over the next 5 years, we can have 25% of our folks who can retire, our teachers. We actually have to make sure we're developing teachers who are still in graduate programs. And so we've been able to leverage a relationship that we have with Towson University, which is really in our backyard. And we get about 50% of our new hires every single year from Towson, to where we're basically creating a school of education within one of our Lighthouse schools. So these are, for us as a business model, this is early recruiting for us and early contracts. But at the same time, we want them to be fully versed in what ST.A.T is, what a learner-centered environment really is, prior to them even coming on board. And I think we have time for one more. Yes, ma'am.
Hi there. I'm a high school counselor, and I see a lot of parents who are helicopter and overly involved in their students' education. And I'm wondering, what are you doing to address sort of the new education for parents? This is a new system for both the under-involved and the over-involved parent. How are they learning along with their students? Not necessarily like about computers, but how to let their kids have that productive struggle and whatnot.
So one thing I will tell you very quickly, I've never met a parent who did not want what's best for their child and to have a better life than they had for themselves. And so I think what we've been able to do is open up the lines of communication a bit more, to where if a parent is in one school, has a child in 3 or 4 schools in our system, they can have one system where they can access all information for all of their kids as well too. They'll be able to ultimately have access to their kids' course requests, their schedules, their grades, their attendance. One of the things that we've heard from teachers so far is that because parents are seeing access to this information, they're not necessarily calling teachers as much, they're just shooting an email saying thank you for updating. And so through district policies in terms of how often do we update, how often do we communicate with parents in terms of interim and non-week reporting, we've been able to really leverage those relationships with parents. But last but not least, we've been able to actually have parent training as well. So they can see what ST.A.T is before their child gets their device. They're actually to figure out what the device is themselves and actually figure out at home how can they assist with kids and their devices as well. So one of the things that's really built in our Blueprint for 2.0 is really around communication, and not just communication to folks in our school system, but our parents and also individuals in our community who don't have school-aged children. Okay? Again, thank you guys for allowing me to share this story, and enjoy the rest of the conference.